Today is March 10th, 2021, and it has actually been almost exactly a year since COVID 19 was first declared a pandemic by the WHO, or World Health Organization. This actually took place exactly 364 days ago on March 11th, 2020. That's when COVID 19 was officially declared a pandemic, so it's been just under a year. Tomorrow will be the 1 year anniversary. So this all took place in the second week of March 2020. That is when lockdown started being implemented. That is when COVID 19 started really spiraling out of control in the United States and in many other countries across the planet. That's when the number of cases and number of deaths both started to completely spiral out of control. Throughout the month of March 2020, that is when the number of cases and the number of deaths due to COVID 19 skyrocketed. At the beginning of March 2020, life basically felt normal. Most people weren't even thinking about COVID 19 outside of China. Most people lived their lives normally. Nobody wore a mask. There weren't any lockdowns in place, no social distancing measures in place. There were less than 100 cases of COVID 19 in the United States, and the number of deaths due to COVID 19 was in the single digits in the United States. But by the end of March, there were hundreds of thousands of cases across the planet, and even in the United States, there were already over 100,000 cases of COVID 19 in the United States just by the end of March 2020, when there were less than 100 cases at the start of March 2020. So we've basically come full circle. It's been an entire year since this all started to go down, since our lives completely changed, since we started spending a lot more time indoors, since our lifestyles completely changed, since we started wearing masks, since the lockdown measures were put into place, since social distancing measures were put into place. This all happened in March of last year. The virus first started spreading to humans in like December 2019 or January 2020, but most people barely thought about this virus until March of last year, March 2020. That is when most people actually had to start changing up their lifestyles in March of 2020 because of this virus. So we've come full circle. It's been an entire year. One of the things that this virus has done is economically, this virus has pretty badly screwed over the United States, and many people are really suffering economically as a result of this virus and as a result of this pandemic. See, many people lost their jobs due to this pandemic, due to this virus, because they were no longer able to go to their job because it was a lot less safe for them now because of this virus. And many businesses were also forced to shut down as a result of this virus in order to stop the spread of this virus. So the unemployment rate skyrocketed last spring. Many people lost their jobs. Many people weren't able to make their house payments. This virus really screwed up the economy of the United States pretty badly, and many people have suffered economically as a direct result of this pandemic. Many people have not been able to make their payments that they need to make, like their house payments, for example, rent payments. They can't afford basic necessities like food or running water, for example. All sorts of things this virus has done to screw up the people of the United States economically. As a result of the disastrous economic consequences that this pandemic has had up until now, the United States federal government has now passed three stimulus bills in order to try to alleviate some of the economic consequences of this pandemic. So the third stimulus package just passed recently. I believe it was earlier today that the House finally approved of the stimulus package, but the first one was passed in March of 2020, just a couple weeks after COVID 19 first became a pandemic, so that one was pretty quick. I guess back when the pandemic was first beginning, there was a sense of urgency that this thing had to be passed quickly. So this stimulus package was called the CARES Act. It passed in late March of 2020. And the main parts of this package, see, this package include many different things, but the main things that this included were $1,200 stimulus checks as well as $600 per week unemployment benefits for people who recently lost their jobs all the way up until the end of July. I think the idea was that initially that this pandemic wouldn't last for that long. It would only last for like a couple months maybe, but then like after a couple months of lockdown, then this pandemic would start to get a lot better, but that's obviously not what happened. It was pretty bad in the spring, but it got definitely got worse in the summer months, and then it got even worse in the fall months. So there were three separate waves of this pandemic in the United States up until now, and we're just now getting past this third wave. I'm really hoping there's not going to be a fourth one. Some scientists are concerned that the B117 mutation could potentially cause a fourth wave in the United States, but we've also vaccinated a good amount of people already in the United States, and we're continuing to vaccinate people at a decent rate, I would say. So there might not be that big of a fourth wave. I don't think it's going to be as bad as the third wave. The third wave was really bad. At one point, we had 300,000 new cases of COVID 19 in a single day and 4,000 deaths per day due to COVID 19. Getting back to the main point though, the first stimulus package passed in late March. In that stimulus package, the unemployment benefits went up until the end of July. I think the idea was also that even if the pandemic would continue on, that they would surely pass a new stimulus package by the end of July or before the end of July, before the unemployment benefits ran out. And then a second stimulus package was proposed by the House in May of 2020, so a couple of months after the CARES Act was passed. But then Republicans in the Senate could not agree on that. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate, they could not agree on how much money should be spent on the second stimulus package, and that took up so many months. See, the second stimulus package that was initially approved by the House, which was controlled by the Democrats, the Senate could not get on board with that. The Senate was controlled by Republicans. Generally, Republicans are in favor of less federal spending than Democrats are, so Democrats and Republicans in the Senate could not agree on how much money should be spent on this stimulus package. And since Republicans controlled the Senate, they were able to decline the House the stimulus package that the House approved of. And this disagreement went on for so many months. It went on all the way until December of 2020, just 3 months ago. By December of 2020, the Senate was finally able to agree on an acceptable budget for the second stimulus package after many months. This stimulus package, the second one, only included $600 checks instead of $1,200 checks, and the unemployment benefits went down to $300 per week instead of $600 per week. So it was less than the first stimulus package. But then, soon after, the Democrats were able to win over the Senate because of the Georgia Senate runoff elections, where Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock both won their respective Senate races. The Senate races were the Senate elections were officially on January 5th, but I don't think either of them were declared the winners until January 6th, which also, I think we all know what happened on January 6th, the Capitol riots and all, but right before the Capitol riots, Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock won their respective Senate races, and because of that, the Democrats were able to control the Senate. So now that the Democrats control the Senate, they were able to pass things a lot more easily because now they control both the House and the Senate, and they also control the presidency. So that made things a lot easier for the Democrats, and that is why they were able to have a higher budget for the third stimulus package that they just passed earlier today. So this third stimulus package actually included $1,400 checks, which is more than both the first one and the second one. The first one was $1,200. Second one was $600. But here's the thing, though. Some people were not happy that they included $1,400, and here's why. During the Georgia Senate runoff elections, the Democrats were campaigning on the fact that if the Democrats would gain control of the Senate, then they would issue $2,000 stimulus checks. But they after Jon Ossoff and Raphael Warnock got elected, they only ended up passing $1,400 stimulus checks. And the argument that they made was that if you include the $600 stimulus checks from the last stimulus package, that adds up to $2,000. But I still think that they should have just stuck with $2,000 because that was kind of misleading on their part. Because when they said $2,000 stimulus checks, a lot of people assumed that it would be 2,000 on top of the 600, so 2,600 in total. But I guess they're technically correct that they gave out $2,000, but still pretty misleading in my opinion. And I think many people weren't happy about that necessarily. But I think it's still great that they passed the $1,400 stimulus package. Many people need the help. Many people have struggled economically due to this pandemic, so it's great that they're now passing this stimulus package with $1,400 checks. I would rather have $2,000 checks, but 1,400 is definitely a lot better than 600 or even 1,200. So this passed the House earlier today. Only one Democrat in the House voted against the bill, but every single Republican also voted against it. But since Democrats controlled the House, they still had enough votes to pass the stimulus bill. So I think that it's pretty great how they were able to get this bill through in just over 2 months since the last bill was passed. The last one was passed in late December. This one was passed in early March. So I think that it's good that they were able to get this one through a lot more quickly. The last bill took so many months. Remember, the first package was passed in March of 2020, second one December of 2020, 9 months after. But now we're just passing the third package, almost a year after the first package was passed. Remember, we're just now hitting a year of this pandemic. Tomorrow, like I said, is the 1 year anniversary of this pandemic beginning. The first package was passed right after the pandemic began, but then it took 9 months to pass the second package, but then only 3 more months in order to pass the third package. So in total, it's been a year since the first package was passed. Let me briefly talk about the differences between the three stimulus packages. I kind of already did that, but I would like to briefly summarize it again. So the March 2020 CARES Act, that gave $600 per week in unemployment benefits for 13 weeks, while the December stimulus package gave only $300 per week in unemployment benefits for 11 weeks. And then the March 2021, apparently this bill is called the American Rescue Plan. This gives $300 in unemployment per week as well, which is the same as the second stimulus package, but this one is for 25 weeks, so it's a lot longer than last time, which I think is great. 25 weeks is basically half a year, so I guess until September 2021, which is a pretty long time. Hopefully, we'll basically be done with this pandemic by then. Hopefully, we'll be near herd immunity by then. I can't say for certain, but we've already vaccinated a good amount of people in this country, and it looks like the vaccination rate is not slowing down anytime soon. So I would say I'm optimistic in terms of getting through this pandemic, but there's also some other differences between these stimulus packages. Like I said, the CARES Act that was passed in March 2020, that was $1,200 per adult, but that also included $500 per dependent. And then the December package was $600 per adult, but also $600 per dependent. And then the March 2021 American Rescue Plan, that's $1,400 per adult, so more than both of the previous two stimulus packages, as well as $1,400 per dependent. So I think that the March 2021 American Rescue Plan overall grants the most benefits to people, which I think is great. I think it's great that they're giving out more economic relief to Americans now, the federal government. I think that people really need it, especially with how badly this pandemic has screwed over many people. Many people were forced to shut down their businesses. Many people were no longer able to work. For many people, it's unsafe to work, especially if they were like older in age or they had serious underlying health conditions. For those sorts of people, especially, this pandemic was pretty hard on them. So it's good that we're finally getting economic relief. This may or may not be the last stimulus package. I think it really depends on how much longer this pandemic goes on for, and whether or not the mutations, the COVID-19 mutations, have a noticeable impact on the length of this pandemic. For example, if the B117 mutation doesn't hit the United States that badly, then this might be the last stimulus package. But if the B117 mutation turns out to screw over the United States pretty badly, then there's definitely going to be the need for a fourth stimulus package. But hopefully, regardless of whether or not there's another stimulus package, I really hope we can get through this pandemic soon, because it's already been a year. It's kind of weird to think about how this all began in March 2020, but we're just now coming back to March. It's like we've come full circle with March 2021 now, and tomorrow is the 1 year anniversary of this disease becoming a pandemic.